Going on tilt is a state of mind a player enters where they cease to play optimally due to the frustration of consecutive failures. What's worse is that there really is no cure once triggered. While achieving something after having a difficult go of things is satisfying, all that a tilted player feels is emptiness. Nobody attempts to fail, but the catch is that to succeed you need to know what to avoid, which means testing boundaries and making mistakes. Failure is inevitable, frustrating, and leads towards tilt. It's not inherently bad, it can help motivate the player towards an obtainable goal, but putting the player on full tilt is typically a line best left uncrossed. We'd like them to hunger for victory, but not go rabid. Why do games end up more frustrating than they have to be, and how can that be avoided? When the player makes a mistake, they're in a vulnerable space, so they can be pretty volatile to certain stimuli. Take Super Mario Sunshine, for example, where certain challenges like this pachinko level can feel half-baked or janky. The player can get screwed over by some weird physics through no fault of their own, and if they run out of lives, then they get this on top of it. Not only does the player feel bitter over a loss they can't learn from, but also get kicked while they're down when the game mocks their misfortune with some cartoonish honks and fanfare. Not to mention, it gets rid of your progress in a level, and even some shines if you weren't watching your save data. It just so happens to be current year, so we should all know by now that the lives and save data stuff is a bit archaic, as a punishment for messing up. Unless the game has some sort of clever spin on the 1-up system, then it's best to just avoid it outright. When you mess up, you want to try again right away, not after something you've already proven you can overcome. If you're especially pissed, loading screens and menus alone can escalate a healthy anger into full-blown tilt. Take DMCV for example, where if you want a good score and take an L, you have to deny the continue, watch a second death animation, load up the equipment menu, start the mission, and then load up the level all over again. It's only about half a minute in real time, but for a fast-paced action game, it feels much longer than it should be. So that's how to treat failure wrong. Let's tackle how to let the player know they lost without needlessly ticking them off. First off, a game should expect the player to make mistakes, and that doesn't have to be a big deal. Games like Dustforce have only the most basic death animation before reloading the level and giving control back to the player. The music doesn't even stop, it just continues indifferent to your performance. Much better than having to listen to an opening hook every time you beef it. This is pretty rare in 3D games just because it's easier to do in 2D, but you can see it surfacing in stuff like A Hat in Time where you take damage from falls instead of outright dying, or even recent Mario Karts where Lakitu rapidly reels you back on track when you fly off the road. Next, the consequences of failure don't have to be so harsh that it misses out on the quote-unquote dirty win. For example, a game can use rankings to acknowledge just how good or bad a run is, while allowing the game to rock fairly loose consequences for failure. You can take hits all day and live, but you won't get a good grade, so new players don't feel bad as long as they can continue the level, and intrepid fans going for high marks can play the same mission over and over again, which they won't mind because they're already into the grind. Some games, like Into the Breach, take this concept further by having multiple optional objectives that, in battles gone pear-shaped, need to be prioritized or abandoned to maintain a win, if not a perfect one. That's what I mean by a dirty win. The results were overall favorable, but things definitely could have gone better. I've brought up good bad games like I Want to Be the Guy before on the channel, where a game can be intentionally frustrating as part of their appeal. Even here, in a game built to piss the player off, there are very intentional design decisions to strike a balance between antagonizing a player and ruining their day. While yes, like Mario Sunshine's pachinko level, I Want to Be the Guy kills the player through no fault of their own, and then makes fun of them for it, the game continues even after the player's death, to make it clear what killed them. So they see what went wrong, and they can try again right away. The question becomes, what is the optimal amount of frustration for motivating the player without upsetting them? It's largely dependent on the game, but I think as a general rule of thumb, it's all about balancing the consequences for failure. If a sequence is going to be demanding or gruelingly long, then the consequence for failure should be lenient. it should be easily retryable so that the player can master it through stick-to-itiveness. If a game is going to be more punishing, then it can afford to start off pretty easy, like a stealth game, which only gets hard once you're spotted. That way the game can demand perfection on a first try without overwhelming the player. Failure and frustration are just a part of life, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. As long as a game isn't needlessly obnoxious, repetitive, or unfair, then it can avoid accidentally putting the player on tilt. Ideally, it should come across as tonally indifferent to their mistakes while rating their performance so that they can see where they need to improve. Even in the worst of cases, nobody is trying to outright ruin nobody's day, and as long as these rules are followed, nobody will.